or Scarf this game, but of course Taka does really well against Weapon Petal. It's an interesting how it works because CP Petal counters Taka, but Taka counters Weapon Petal. So maybe, as you said, that could be in preparation for the pick for Bren Esports.
Definitely as well. But as for the side of Nebulae, we saw some very strong performance coming up from them when they were up against that of Bren Esports. Nebulae going up against Impunity. They put up quite a performance, and we actually thought, or rather from the desk itself, we actually thought that Nebulae may have stood a chance. But now that and the Scarf is being picked up, it will be an easy Celeste pickup just to chain the two stunts together for the side of Bren Esports. However, we also know banning out the Scarf definitely opens up the opportunity for Bren Esports to pick up that potential Petal, in which they have been showing to just own and ride with. However, we will be seeing that of a Black Feather at this point in time. Hopefully, Nebulae will pick up that of Celeste.
I don't think that Nebulae are going to pick Celeste because the reason they banned Scarf was to bait out a Celeste pick just so they could counter it with their own Black Feather. And now Bren Esports has done exactly the same thing. They picked up Black Feather, and there's no reason for Nebulae to go for Celeste. It's countered by Black Feather. It's reasonably well countered by Catherine. The core pick does make a lot of sense. Now, they could go Arden or maybe a Finn, but I still think Grace is the smart pick for Nebulae. There aren't many counters left. They could go for a Sky, Christopher Sky with a lane weapon Black Feather to try and counter that Cruel, but that would be risky against Idris. Idris does really well against Sky, especially Crystal Power. And I think, that was a really good draft from Nebulae. They're going to go the Arden instead. Now, it's possible that Bren Esports could try double protect the carry comp, maybe picking up a jungle. I guess there aren't that many junglers left because Lance has been taken off the table. They could go for something like a Fortress would work well with this Black Feather, but then it's like a dive comp against a dive comp. So it's really risky. They're going to stick with their Petal. They're comfortable on Weapon Petal. We asked some questions about whether Bren Esports had practiced it, and they clearly have. Really not interesting to see that they put so much emphasis on this Petal in every draft.
Yep, and on top of that as well, Petal going up against that of Cruel will definitely be a very good pickup for the side of Bren Esports. But this time, maybe we'll not see a weapon Petal because you have the Black Feather in that of lane, or they might just switch out their roles as well. So that way, but I personally think that a Crystal Petal will just do so much better into that of Cruel and of course the CP Idris as well, because you have just a little more tankiness from your minions, and with that, granted, you don't have the range that Trampoline provides you, but honestly, a lot of the damage will be coming out from the nibbling the minions do.
Yeah, I have to disagree. I think Weapon Petal would be a lot better because CP Idris absolutely destroys Crystal Power Petal. Because unless you get a ridiculous early game snowball, which is quite hard to do at the moment, especially against an Arden who can just keep giving Cruel a barrier, and Cruel can keep running away, I think if it gets to around 15 minutes, then the Idris Chakram will take out all your minions, and then you do no damage, so Idris can just focus on the Black Feather. I think that it would be really smart to swap roles, put Weapon Petal in lane to try and farm up evenly with Idris, and you'll put your CP Black Feather in the jungle, just because Crystal Petal really does struggle against Idris.
Yep, that would work as well. But like I said, Bren Esports, they can actually go for that snowball against that of Cruel if they are going to run that CP Petal, but like you say, the Weapon Petal is just much better going into a weapon Idris, a CP Idris. But all in all, I must say a CP Idris and a Cruel plus an Arden would work a little better as compared to in the late game, in which Bren Esports actually excel in. I mean, we saw their past performances. They just do so much better in the late game as compared to the early game aggression. They just really want to play passive in that of the early game, farm up, get their items, and then destroy you with maybe a Kraken steal, and from then just snowball you in that late game. We cannot quite consider it snowball, but all in all, that is how Bren Esports have been playing.
Yeah, they do tend to favour their late game composition, so I would be very surprised if they bring out the Crystal Petal. Maybe that is their plan, to tempt you into thinking that they're going to go very late game with CP Black Feather and with Weapon Petal, and then switch it up, bring Black Feather into lane as weapon, try and kill Idris early, and then snowball the CP Petal.
Yeah, but thank you for that. As we are jumping onto the fold, let's invite I Request a Duel back as he talks about the game.
Okay, yes, thank you for that, Mini Miter, and of course to you as well, Luxuria, who I'll be casting alongside for this third place matchup between Nebulae and Bren Esports. But I've got something to say indeed to start off with. We're seeing Sync 1 on the Black Feather and Mr. Jim on the pedal this time. So I know you were talking about whether Bren Esports have practiced this, but have both Mr. Jim and Cincy1 practiced the weapon pedal?
I mean, weapon pedal, it's one of those heroes that you can just slap Sorrow Blade and double tornado trigger and you do a whole lot of damage. And honestly, if you were to talk about practice wise, I can consider that both players would have practiced the very meta weapon pattern, because I mean, if you go over to Southeast Asia, you start ranking there, you would understand what I'm trying to talk about. Very little, a lot of damage being put out by Mr. Jim on this weapon pattern, but they will just disengage and will go back to lane.
I do worry for the side of Nebulae with that Cruel pickup if they're going to be able to find the targets they want. I mean, in the late game, once they've got the CC coming out from the Gauntlet and from House Heart on the side of Cruel, they might be able to lock down some targets and pick up some kills. But in early game, I do worry for Cruel. Of course, he has the perks of Shadows and Power Me. That's going to help him enough, and the Dead Man's Rush. I just think going up against a Petal and a Black Feather, who, of course, Black Feather not having the escape early on without the Rose Offensive, but Petal is going to have its trampoline, and is even with the Bramblethorn seeds being put down, it's going to be quite a bit of a pain to get away from.
Well, definitely.
Or to catch on to, I should say. My bad.
Yeah, so definitely, but we are now seeing the weapon pattern being in lane, which means that Mr. Jim can easily just get his Sorrow Blade into Double Tyrant's Tornado Trigger and just put out a lot of damage, and that his range actually outscales. I think it is a attack range of 7 with a maximum trampoline, which means he actually outscales in terms of attack range all the heroes on the foes, and that is why weapon pattern is just so strong. And with the Munions that acts like a pseudo defense, pseudo wall for you, it will be difficult for, say, a weapon Idris to hit you, but we will know, and we might see the CP Idris coming out, or the Cycle of Nebulae would actually risk running double weapon power, which is highly unlikely.
Yeah, I do think it's a bit unlikely to go for that double weapon power kind of comp. We are more than likely going to see a CP Idris come out on Trophies. So yeah, with that, I think it's just they haven't gone back to base yet. You can see Sing on 2,197 gold, and they are going to make that first back now. 33 CS, doing very well for the CS gang. 10 per minute, more than enough there. And looking over to the side of Bren Esports, where you've got Mr. Jim Sing back slightly on 26. He should be able to catch up after getting this wave here, however. And in that mid-game, I think we saw in the middle of the map, we did see Sync1 take that Nutrient away from this Cruel. And they're going to try and steal more at this point. They don't get it, however. Trophies has gone down to try help them out. And you see Truffless as well there on the Arden, but right now Bren, they seem kind of comfortable where they are. Oh, it's Sync1 gonna be missing one of those on points and gets punished for it. First blood, and that's the case where, yeah, you can't escape from Pro if you don't have that Rose Offensive just yet.
Definitely, and one thing as well, very good aggression coming out from that of Bren Esports, but like said earlier on, they just do not excel in that early aggression game that they are trying to put out at this point in time. What Bren Esports really want to do at this point in time is just farm up, get the items, like said before, and just push the advantage whenever they get one in that of the late game. So honestly, they should not just go for aggressive plays, because Iron Gildai has got a tension bow at this point in time, will put out a lot of damage with the DMR, and of course the Smite as well. So that is one thing that maybe Bren Esports have to consider, going for the aggressive maneuvers, Mr. Jim, however, going for the turret push.
Yep, and I Angry Die picking up that tension bow might be able to help them out there a bit more for the damage, where they actually landed onto Mr. Jim, followed up by the smite, but they go in fairly deep and almost fall to Sync 1, who got quite a few stacks there with the broken hearts, and it now have to back out of here. Mr. Jim actually fairly low, going to go to the backs with Sync 1, and this is a fairly common rotation we've been seeing happening, you know, the laners going there and even taking the farm for themselves, but Sync 1 going to go and take those 2 back camps. I'm surprised because right now is Mr. Jim we are seeing up in the lane. However, they want to get enough CP items onto Sync 1 that has that burst damage to kind of counter-react with the Cruel that's diving in.
Yep, honestly, I Angry Die on this Cruel can really just go onto lane right now, just apply very, very big pressure onto that of Bren Esports, but if they are not doing that, then they are giving the entirety of, you know, Bren Esports to just slowly farm up, because we all know CP Blackfeather really wants that level 8 firstly, and on top of that, with that Shatter Glass, he will be putting out a lot of damage, but a lot of damage onto Mr. Jim.
Yep, and we do see that in return right now because, of course, there's a Shatter Glass over on Trophies as well. So just a lot of damage all across the board on both teams. And I'm just surprised we haven't seen more fights breaking out so far. Just a fair bit of poke and, you know, rotations coming through once again by Bren Esports. And until we see more pressure come out by Nebulae, or maybe even Bren themselves, but right now it's definitely looking like Nebulae wants to be putting down more pressure up in this lane. I don't think we'll see anything happen, and there's a From House Heart is going to miss, however, and they're just going to back off from that.
Yep, and I mean, we have been talking about a lot of times how Bren Esports really want to be passive and just play that slow game, however.
Yep, slow game, but looks like with Sync 1 diving in deep onto Angry Die is going to be upscale turret range, turn around and pick it up again. And then it looks like they're not going to be able to get any more than that, but I think Bren should be happy with that kind of trade-out because now they're able to go to the back jungle of Nebulae and take all the farm that was weighing there. They might even get a Crystal Sentry with it.
Yep, they will definitely push this Crystal Sentry, but all in all, a rather stagnated fight. However, we do see Bren Esports having definitely the better macro control and of course the map control. If they are unable to push the turret, they immediately went into the back lines of Nebulae, remove any sort of farm that, you know, Angry Die can possibly have. However, their first turret will definitely go down to Trophies or the CP Eaters.
Yep, Trophy's going to pick that up and be putting down a lot of return damage onto Guessing. I Angry Die trying to find the kill. They managed to get, but they're going to fall in return, and Sync 1 now going to jump onto Trophies, but taking a fair amount of damage without that on point to get before fight health, and there's going to be the Vanguard to get Trophies out there safely. Sync 1 needs to be careful. There are full broken heart stacks, but you can see that just one outgoing Chakram is enough damage. Maybe if the full thing hits him, Sync 1 will fall, but Mr. Jim looking for a return turret air. He has the escape with the trampoline, so he should be safe. Sync 1, however, with one Rose offensive, but if you don't use it at the right time, you are going to fall. They need to be careful. From Household, not up yet, and Nebulae going to back out this one. So a trade in turrets, it kind of put Bren Esports even with them because they previously took the Crystal Sentry from the side of Nebulae that just returned into the jungle there, and they got some gold out there because we look, they're slightly ahead, about 1.5k, where they're sitting at 18.7 of 17.5 for the side of Nebulae. So not too far. It can go swing around very quickly, and Gold Miner is one of those objectives that can do just that.
Very defensive gauntlet that came out from Arden just now, setting his gauntlet down for 100 seconds cooldown, and that is something that, you know, Bren Esports can really just capitalize on. However, we do see them playing relatively passive. They wanted to go for the gold mine, but spotted both Angry Die and Trophies out in that tri-brush over there, Guessing, going in for the Merciless Pursuit.
Yes, to get the stun off, however, Trophies actually got the dash and got the distance to get away from the rest of Bren Esports, and we can see Guessing doing an alright job there with 10 Merciless Pursuit stacks about almost 10 minutes in. Could be looking for a bit more, would be nice, but at least if you're going 1 per minute, that's going to add up by the end game, hopefully.
Well, yep, definitely. So Sync One, or rather the entirety of Bren Esports, can really just push the gold mine at this point in time. Take it just further. The gold lead that they currently have. They have about a 1.5k gold lead, like you said and you mentioned before. It is not much all in all, but honestly, coming into this game, I mean, they have got very, very good objective taking, and they've got
there's from House High onto Mr. Jim. Crucible followed up, and there's going to be the Fountain as well, just to get him out there live, and it will be enough for Bren Esports to back out there, but Sync One doesn't really want to do it at first. It's going to get a bit of damage onto Iron View Dive, and use Rose Offensive out of there, but be able to follow through with the rest of the fight. There's going to be a gauntlet onto Sync One, is going to stun him out, and Truffy's will be able to get the return kill. Might get more, but no, does not have the boots up. I think used them before just to chase down onto the kill for Sync One, and didn't have enough mobility to catch up to the rest of the team. But you can see these teams going fairly even at the moment.
Yep, and as we all know as well, Trophies on this Idris, generally he'll play it like very much like a caster hero. He goes in with, he throws out his chakram, and honestly from that, if it hits, he'll continue on the team fights. Otherwise, he will just back off. As we see in a lot of team fights, Trophies will generally stay relatively healthy all in all. So it is just down to Iron Will Die, and of course Truffless on that Arden to just soak up as much damage as as humanely possible. Of course, it will be no problem for the Arden since he is a tank of the team, but as for Iron Will Die, without enough defense and enough sustain that his build can offer, it will be a tough choice. And Trophies once again.
Oh my, I just have to say, Mini Mida, if you're watching, just look at Trophy's build. He's going for the double Shatterglass start. And I mean, we talked about Shatterglass, whether it's a first item pickup. I say yes, Mini says no, but right now we see from House High onto Mr. Jim once again. They're able to trampoline out there, and I mean, it's real tough, and this is why I meant for Cruel in the late game to just get onto anyone. And Bren Esports are going to turn around, get the return kill onto the Arden, a low poke damage onto Trophies. Now that's the problem with Trophies' build. If they are not in control of the fight and Trophies isn't safely on the backline, he has no defense whatsoever. Double Shard Glass, one Heavy Prism, and a Piercing Shard, going to be building more towards that Broken Myth second. But right now, he can do a lot of damage to the likes of Black Feather and Mr. Jim, who don't have much defense either.
Yep, we saw this coming up from Trophies, I think in yesterday's game as well. Double Shatterglass into Broken Myth, and summing up the entire build will be an alternating current. And that is something that we saw a lot from Trophies, at least. Like I say, he is relying on Trophies, Truffless, and Iron Will Die on that Cruel and Arden to just soak up damage, and from there he just throw out his chakram, put out as much damage as possible, and hopefully win the team fights with Guessing X going in with the Merciless Pursuit.
Yep, and there's going to be the engage coming out from the side of Bren. They're pushing Nebulae back for now, but you can see Cruel seeing him wait half health in that brush. They might be better to just back off from the fight completely, but he's going to hold his ground, and yeah, Bren Esports just going to turn away from this one. Might be looking for that Crystal Sentry down there, but I think they're calling it a bit too risky right now, and might just steal some of this farm away if they can. You see Mr. Jim trying to there.
Yep, and it's really, really difficult, however, for Iron Will Die to just soak up damage like I've been mentioning, only because of the range that Petal has, and the amount of poke as well. We see the basic attacks of Petal has got a range of 7. That is a lot of range, and like I said, he outranges, or rather Petal outranges any hero on the fold at this point in time, even Baron, if I remember correctly. And with that range itself, it is very, very difficult for Crow to just jump onto Mr. Jim, soak up the basic damage coming up from Mr. Jim, and of course to have to deal with Sync One as well. And Sync One can easily Rose Offensive into the backlines, take out Trophies as well. So in this particular lineup, we saw from yesterday when Nebula were up against Nebulae was up against in Elite 8, if I'm not wrong. They pulled out the same thing. Elite 8 has the Diacom, but because of the amount of CCs that his team has, right, Nebulae has, Trophies was kept safe in every single team fight. Even now we see.
Well, we do see the gauntlet go down, and without an echo, I'm really not I'm not too sure about that gauntlet usage, because you were talking before about how hard it is for Yu Dai to get onto a target, and with the house heart on its own, it's just not enough. As we see there, it lands onto Sin C1, but the damage output coming out from the rest of the team, they just shut them down, taking down Yu Dai and Truffless. Meanwhile, Truffy's just on that backline where he should be, but in this case with no front line to really put any kind of ground between him and the enemy, and just has to back off as the first Kraken of the match is taken 15 minutes 26 seconds into the game. And yeah, Bren Esports just looking really strong. If the side of Nebulae want to do anything about this, they're going to have to chain the CCs they have together, because when you throw out, if you're able to put the gauntlet down around them, then they shouldn't be able to escape from that area, and Cruel has a good kind of range and field to play with it.
Yep, but then again, they can't quite afford that as well. 531 crit damage on Mr. Jim onto that turret. But why I say they cannot quite afford the what is that called? The echo. Only reason because they really need to soak up as much damage as possible. So Trophies will try to tank up for the boyfriend over there from Hell's Heart, landing on Petal.
Yep, and that's the thing. You can't just be throwing these from House Hearts out on their own, especially if you're not following up at all with them. And I really don't know what Nebulae can do here as the Kraken and the whole team of Bren Esports push in to the base. There's going to be a gauntlet. It does catch Outguessing and Mr. Jim in there, but Mr. Jim just continues to go for the turret, loses his life for it, but he's going to be happy enough with that Sin C1, going to fight it out with Yu Dai, realizing that maybe on his own, without this pedal, that weapon power pedal was actually putting in a lot of work. Going to turn around, wait for the stacks to wear off, not able to find Yu Dai though, as the broken heart stacks also falling off in return, and the chase is on. There's a merciless pursuit to stop Yu Dai, however, and they're continuing to chase them down. Sync 1 going to turn around with it on point just to scare him away, let him know what's up, and they're going to back out of that, because now Nebulae, they're lost without a turret. Black Feather can wall jump with the Rose Offensive, or I guess wall pass through, whatever you want to call that. Mr. Jim can actually jump over the wall physically with the trampoline, and either way, that's a lot of damage going over towards that crystal. You talked about before, we saw how much damage Mr. Jim's doing to these objectives.
Yep, there you go. And honestly, they don't really have to risk it and go for that backdoor. However, I might just want to take that back, because Bren Chong, they are very well known for the Bren Bush, right? That was when I was casting with Arcerai, and they just camped for their dear life for that opportunity. But a fight might just break out right now, or maybe
Mr.
not.
Jim. Come on, do it, Mr. Jim. No, there's the flare. We'll catch out Mr. Jim. I was thinking maybe while the rest of Bren Esports fight up in the lane, Mr. Jim could get around the back, and he might still be looking for that opportunity. I believe he might, because you see him seeing Wang patiently over here at the back where the back spawns are, but Nebulae are onto it. They know that it's too much of a possibility. But right now, you're right. Bren Esports could just try force out a fight or take a second Kraken now that Kraken is up on the fold, which would potentially force a fight, because Nebulae have to come to stop it happening.
Yep, I don't want to say this is a very one-sided match, because there was like 4 kills going over to the side of Nebulae. But honestly, at this point in time, there is really nothing much that Nebulae can do, unless, of course, you know, someone finds an Atlas, Mr. Jim, kills Mr. Jim immediately, chain the CCs like you mentioned, and maybe Bren Esports, or rather Nebulae, would stand a chance. However, if they are unable to find those CCs, Yu Dai in a very, very uncomfortable position at this point in time. Mr. Jim as well, still looking for that backdoor.
Yep, you can see Mr. Jim sitting down there. Doesn't know that Scout Trap is there, however. Maybe he does. It's gonna pop it anyway, and Kraken is pushing through. They rarely could just push in with Kraken. If they overwhelm the enemy at this point, They should be able to do it. Kraken should have at least half health by Crystal, but Bren Esports, the full team, did not commit to this one, and Nebulae making this Kraken burn down quite quickly with Sync 1 on that backline. It's going to be Truffy's to jump onto them, trying to do work, but Mr. Jim coming out of nowhere, now just focusing on the Crystal completely. No one checked Sync 1, and he's able to get it, and that's going to be GG for Game 1 between Nebulae and Bren Esports, as Bren Esports taking the win there. And yeah, I mean, I just would have liked to see Nebulae use their CC that they had, and that's more the fact that even if they're not going to build for Echo, it makes it that much more crucial as to how they use their CC, how they use that gauntlet in conjunction with the From House Heart to really lock down the targets they needed to. But, you know,